Hello, and welcome to the Night Sky Reader. I'm here with a story to help you relax, meditate, or gently drift to sleep. Tonight, when desert ephemerals wake after rain, settle in, close your eyes if you'd like, and let's begin. The rain has already passed by the time the bajada comes fully into view. Cloud shadow is lifting from the wide slope, and what remains is a quiet darkening of the ground. Gravel that was pale an hour ago now holds a deeper color, gray-brown and muted, as if each stone has taken one cool breath. In the American Southwest, after desert rain, the first change is often like this: not a burst of color, not a sudden crowding of flowers, only the scent of wet creosote moving through clean air, the shallow seams where runoff has gathered, the faint softening of dust into soil. At first glance, the surface seems almost unchanged. Creosote shrubs stand where they always stand, rounded and spare, their small leaves washed clean. Between them lie open flats of pebbles and grit, the long spread of the bajada descending from rougher uplands toward lower ground. Water has moved lightly across it, not in a flood, but enough to trace silver paths that are already fading. Tiny fans of silt have settled beside a stone. A crescent of finer soil lies at the edge of a slight depression. The air is cool enough to keep scent close to the earth. One place draws the eye down more than others: a low runoff seam that traces the lee of a flat creosote, where litter and fine silt have gathered over many seasons into a shallow, darker crescent. The water paused longest here. The ground is still faintly darker than the open flats around it, as though the land pressed a small palm to paper and held it an extra moment. Nothing about the place asks for hurry. The recent rain leaves no grand announcement. It has entered quietly, sinking where the gravel opens, pausing where the crust is thin, slipping beneath quartz chips and dark volcanic pebbles. For a few breaths, the desert holds its still face, and a mind expecting quick proof might think the story ends there, with damp ground and passing weather. But the true beginning is under the surface. Beneath the skin of gravel, in the first shallow layer where water lingers before sun and wind begin their work again, seeds are taking measure. They rest in pockets so small they could be missed by any glance from above. Some lie in the narrow shelter beside a pebble. Some settle in old seams left by runoff from another season. Some are held in the faint roughness beneath that creosote canopy where litter and dust have gathered, grain by grain, over time. They are annual seeds, the quiet reserve of desert wildflowers, carried here by last year's stems, by wind, by water, by chance, and then held by the shape of the land. They do not answer every shower. That is one of the plain wisdoms written into a bajada after desert rain. Moisture has arrived, yes, but moisture in the desert is never only a matter of falling from the sky. It matters how much falls, how slowly it enters, how long the cool lasts afterward, how deep the wetness reaches before the day clears. One brief passing sprinkle may dampen only the surface and vanish. A steadier rain may darken the shallow soil enough to soften seed coats and begin the more serious exchange. On this slope, enough water has held in some places and not in others. The response will be selective, patterned, exact. In the thin, wet films beneath the gravel, some seed coats begin to loosen. Their outer layers, dry for months or longer, take in water and swell. The change is slight at first, almost beyond naming. A seed becomes heavier, its wrinkled surface rounds, stored chemistry stirs. Yet even now there is no uniform awakening. A patch that received a little more runoff may hold moisture long enough for one cluster to begin. A nearby rise, exposed to air and only lightly wetted, may remain still. Beneath one spread of stones, several kinds of seed lie together, but not all accept the signal. Some will wait for a deeper soaking, or a second rain close behind the first. Delay here is not reluctance, it is part of survival. Water holds for a time in the small architecture of the bajada, resting in the gaps between grains of sand and silt, clinging under flat pebbles where shade lasts a little longer, seeping along a nearly invisible line where runoff slowed and spread. In the darker crescent at the base of the creosote, where the silt holds moisture the way a sponge holds what it can, the hidden calendar of the desert advances. Seed tissue hydrates. Dormancy breaks in those prepared to trust this moment. The earth above them stays quiet, but under it a decision has been made. Soon the first irreversible movement begins. A pale tip presses outward from a softened seed and enters the soil. It is not green. It does not rise toward light. First it goes down. This first root, moving down before anything rises up, is called the radical, and it is no thicker than a thread. Yet it is the firmest statement a desert annual can make. Moisture is here now. Use it before it is gone. The root slips into the damp granules beneath the gravel, finding purchase in a world of tiny spaces. Root hairs follow, so fine they are nearly an idea more than a structure. Touching grains of soil, drawing from the thin water that coats them. On the bajada, where the soil is shallow and often stony, such intimacy matters. A pebble can cast enough shade to preserve a trace of dampness through the morning. A slight tilt in the ground can guide water into one pocket and leave another dry. Success is built from these small differences. Above ground, the landscape still appears restrained. The creosote flats remain open. The colors remain mostly those of stone, stem, and washed sand. Yet the future desert bloom is now anchored. A root has entered. A plant has committed itself to this rain pulse and no other. In the cool spell after the storm, while clouds still soften the light and the upper inch of soil has not yet given back all it borrowed from the sky, more white threads descend. Not everywhere. Never everywhere. Only where conditions have aligned well enough. The race is gentle, but it is real. Wind returns by afternoon in a modest way, not harsh, only persistent. The air begins to dry from the top down. Sun moves between the shrubs and lays warmth across open gravel. Moisture starts to lift and leave, first from the surface, then from the spaces nearest it. The roots that entered early reach deeper into what remains. They branch around grit and between compacted crumbs of earth. The plant spends itself carefully. First secure water, first hold. The green part can come later. And then, in the next cool morning, the surface begins to answer. At the edge of a runoff seam, where silt dried in a thin arc, pin-sized cotyledons push upward and part the dark crust. Between two quartz pebbles, a pair of pale green leaves lifts clear of the soil and steadies. In the darker crescent beneath the creosote, where the silt held moisture one day longer than the open ground, a small cluster of seedlings appears, as if the earth has grown a fine nap overnight. The change is still modest. One could cross the bajada quickly and miss much of it. But if the eye lowers and stays low, the land is no longer bare in the old way. Green comes through gravel in patterns. On the open flats, where rain entered but did not linger deeply, the seedlings are sparse and widely spaced. In the slight depressions where water paused, they gather more closely. Along the faded thread of runoff, rosettes form small constellations, each only a few inches across. The bajada, so broad from a distance, begins to reveal itself as many small climates at once. One side of a stone is still too exposed. The other side, shaded at the right hour, supports a tender start. Life follows the details. Some of the first visible leaves belong to desert gold, still low and silver green with a soft fuzz that helps slow water loss. Their future flowers are nowhere near open yet, but the shape of them is already present in miniature. Nearer the ground, sand verbena begins as a compact spread of succulent leaves, thick enough to store a little of what the rain has offered. In another pocket, delicate phacelia forms fine divided foliage, almost fern-like in its early grace. Here and there, the young growth of evening primrose gathers close to the soil, conserving warmth from the night and moisture from below. None of these occupy the slope in a blanket. They rise in patches, in seams, in little neighborhoods shaped by water and chance. The days after rain unfold with an unhurried urgency. Each morning gives the seedlings a cool interval in which to expand leaf surface, to gather light, to continue the exchange begun underground. Each afternoon draws something back. The air clears. The scent of wet creosote fades, though sometimes a crushed resin note lingers where the shrubs still hold droplets in shade. Gravel lightens as it dries. Yet the plants continue. Their stems stay low. Their leaves do not waste motion. On a bajada, height is less important than timing. Close to the ground, the promise is everywhere. A rosette broadens by a fraction each day. A stem thickens. The first buds collect at the centers of leaves, hidden at first among silver fuzz or green flesh. A bee flies through and finds little yet, then moves on. A small fly pauses on damp soil at dawn. Ants navigate around new stems as if adjusting old routes by tiny degrees. The land brightens without ever becoming loud. Soon the shift from leaf to flower begins. It comes first in the cool clarity of morning, when the bajada has released the night's stored chill only slowly, and the flowers can open before heat presses too hard on the day. Desert gold lifts its yellow faces above the low leaf clusters, not tall by meadow standards, but luminous against stone. The color is warm rather than fierce, a dry country yellow that seems to gather light and hold it close. Nearby, sand verbena opens low to the ground in pale pink to lavender rings, each cluster close enough to the soil to escape the push of wind. The air over them carries a faint sweetness, noticeable only when the morning remains still. Phacelia follows with quieter blue-violet notes, its coiled blooms uncurling into softness. The flowers are small, but in a patch where several have opened together, the effect is cool and velvety against the sharper mineral colors of the slope. A few evening primrose blooms linger where the hour is early enough, their petals still open from the edge between night and day, delicate and nearly luminous in the slant light. Farther along the bajada, another primrose bud prepares for the next dimming of day rather than this morning's sun. Even among wildflowers of the same rain pulse, timing differs by species, exposure, and the moisture each root still holds. In the darker crescent beneath the creosote, where the silt was most generous, several kinds have opened together. Desert gold and sand verbena sit within arm's reach of each other, sharing that one good pocket of ground, their colors close and warm against the gray shrub above them. This is the widest vision of the bloom the story offers, and it is a small one by any meadow standard, yet complete in its own terms. This is the visible center of the cycle, the phase most people mean when they speak of a desert bloom. Yet even now the beauty is local, patterned, precise. One shallow swale glows with scattered yellow. A stonier rise nearby holds only a few blossoms among many leaves. Farther downslope, a seam of settled silt hosts a ribbon of blossoms that follows the memory of water. The bajada does not become a single carpet. It becomes legible. The morning light moves across the American Southwest with that clear, spare quality known to desert places after a storm. The sky is open again. Distant hills hold a washed blue edge. Close at hand, tiny shadows under petals and leaves show how low these annuals keep themselves, how little they ask from the air above them. Small bees travel from bloom to bloom without drama. Hoverflies pause and drift. A beetle works across the base of a sand verbena cluster and disappears into shade. Pollination here is not spectacle. It is one more modest exchange, folded into the same brief weather window that woke the seeds. There is enough nectar to matter, enough pollen to carry, enough color to draw those who know how to read it. Insects do not need the whole slope to blaze. They move through the patchwork efficiently, crossing open gravel to reach the next pocket of bloom. A bee lands on desert gold and leaves a dusting behind. A fly settles in the cool center of a phacelia flower. The flowers open as the conditions allow, not to decorate the land, but to complete a sequence already underway since water softened the first seed coat beneath the stones. A hurried mind, entering this scene with a wish for spectacle, gradually loses that wish. The bloom does not insist. It invites. Pleasure comes from noticing how a single sand verbena ring lies almost flush with the earth, how petals catch the cool before the day warms. Comfort settles in the silver cast of young desert gold leaves. Steadiness arrives in the way the flowers open according to temperature and light, not according to anyone's schedule. The land is not withholding. It is simply exact. By late morning, the pressure that has always been part of the story becomes easier to see. Sun climbs. Shadows shorten. The bajada, still beautiful, begins to lose moisture faster than it did at dawn. The petals of some flowers relax at the edges, not all at once, and not with sadness, only with purpose. Leaves angle slightly. Stems remain low. Where pollination has occurred, the work of display starts to give way to the work that matters next. A slight thickening begins at the base of spent petals, almost too small to see. Energy shifts inward. On a desert slope like this, flowering is never the finish. Seed is the finish. Heat is not a villain here. It is a fact of timing, as necessary to the shape of the cycle as the rain was. The same warmth that helps a bud open in the early hours can, by afternoon, empty the upper soil of whatever free moisture remains. Plants that rose in response to the storm now move with great economy. Some flowers close sooner. Some continue a little longer in partial shade. A patch that germinated on less water may remain mostly leafy, setting fewer seeds. Another patch, favored by runoff and a deeper pocket of damp soil, completes a fuller bloom before turning toward fruit. The honesty of the bajada lies in these differences. Some stems are vigorous, some are slight, some annuals bloom in a restrained way, offering only a few flowers but ripening seed regardless. Success in this landscape is not measured by abundance of petals alone. It is measured by completion. A plant does not need to remain in flower for long. It needs only long enough. By afternoon, the first signs of seed making can be read in the flowers that have already been visited. Desert gold heads, once open and bright, begin the subtle tightening that leads toward dry seed. Sand verbena, after its low sweet rings have had their cool hour, shifts from softness to structure. Phacelia's delicate bloom coils gradually toward the next stage. Evening primrose petals, so translucent in angled light, lose their looseness and fold back from the day. All of this happens quietly, close to the ground, without any feeling of collapse. The cycle is not ending poorly, it is proceeding. In the crescent beneath the creosote, both things are present at once. One sand verbena still open, still faintly sweet, and beside it a neighboring plant already past that stage, its low stem compacting inward, making something harder and more durable than a flower. The insects thin out as heat settles more fully. A few bees still travel the last open flowers. Small flies rest in shade. The air over the bajada grows clearer, drier, less scented. The smell of damp soil that followed the storm has mostly lifted, leaving mineral warmth, resin from sunstruck creosote, and the faint green note of fresh leaves beginning to mature. What remains hidden below is enough for some roots, but the easy surface moisture is gone. And still the place does not feel empty. If anything, it feels more complete. The briefness that might trouble a mind hoping to hold the bloom in one unchanged image becomes, on longer watch, the very thing that steadies it. Flowers open, receive, close. Moisture comes, is used, is passed into stem and seed. Enough. Toward evening, the light begins to lengthen across the bajada. The hardest heat slips away from the stones. Shade returns first beneath creosote and along the small ridges where gravel rises slightly above the runoff seams. Petals that remained open in cooler pockets ease shut. Color lowers into the slope rather than shining from it. The yellow of desert gold softens. The pink and lavender of sand verbena become dusk tones. Blue phacelia gathers itself into shadow. The insects quiet almost without notice. This is not the same stillness that followed the rain. That earlier stillness concealed beginnings. This one contains completion. Fresh seeds are forming in heads and capsules low over the ground. Some are already drying toward release. Some will fall only inches from the plant that made them. Some will catch in the roughness beneath a shrub. Some will travel down a slight grade with the next runoff, not far, just far enough. In the crescent beneath the creosote, seeds are forming where once there was only damp silt and waiting. They will join the older reserve already present below, a bank of possibility held beneath gravel and crust. Many seeds on this bajada never germinated at all during this rain pulse. They remain where they were, unchanged in appearance, still waiting for a wetter storm or a better sequence of cool days. Their waiting is not wasted, it is another form of continuity. The desert does not spend everything at once. Some plants rise now, flower now, seed now. Others stay below, preserving the future by refusing the wrong moment. Under 1 square yard of gravel lie both outcomes together, the descendants of this week's bloom, and the older sleepers that chose not to answer yet. As dusk settles farther in, the broad slope returns to its more familiar colors: stone, stem, dry earth, the dark roundness of creosote. Yet it is not the same surface that greeted the rain. It now holds traces of what has passed through it. Fine roots have moved and begun to dry. Stems have enlarged. Flowers have opened and folded. Seed has started its return to the ground. The cycle has left evidence for anyone close enough to see it, and patient enough to stay until the visible brightness recedes. Overhead, the sky clears into a calm evening depth. The washed air of the storm day has become cooler again. In the lowest pockets of the bajada, shadow settles first. The petals of evening opening flowers prepare for their own brief watch, while the morning bloom rests closed. The land does not choose one hour over another. It uses each. A faint breath moves through the creosote and carries, for an instant, a memory of the rain that started all this. Then even that fades. Night comes gently to the desert wildflowers. The bajada grows quiet enough that the space between plants feels large again, yet beneath the gravel, beneath the crust that will harden in the dry air, the hidden calendar remains in place. New seed is joining old seed. Ungerminated seed rests in patient darkness. The next desert rain is not promised for any date that can be known from here, but the land is prepared in the only way it can be prepared: by keeping time in small, durable forms, by storing response in silence, by resting without emptiness. So the American Southwest returns to stillness, and the sleep story of this slope closes where it began, on ground that seems almost unchanged. Dark stones will pale again. Creosote will keep its shape through dry weeks. Wind will move dust lightly across the flats. And under that quiet surface, where water once passed and roots once held for a little while, seeds will wait with calm precision for another desert rain. Thank you for spending this time with the Night Sky Reader. May your night be peaceful. Until next time, rest well.